Korngold was a genius. I think Korngold, if you put Mozart and Korngold next to each other, Korngold wins every time.
Erich Korngold was a composer in the early 20th century. He is most well known for his film music writing.
Erich Korngold, I never really knew much of his music. I mean, I always knew that he was one of the pioneers of the film music industry, traveled to America from his homeland of Vienna and became a hugely successful film composer in Hollywood.
He was a greater prodigy at an earlier age than Mozart was.
Harmonically, it's incredibly complex, but juicy in that throw in extra notes in chords to make them more colourful.
Before he, had the legal right to vote, he'd written an opera, a ballet, symphony, things that had been toured across Europe.
He was one of the big composers of Hollywood.
You don't have John Williams without Korngold. Korngold was revolutionary in, tying themes and sounds and emotions to characters in film. Unfortunately, Europe, much like the sound that you hear in the Korngold, was falling apart. It was a rough time for the world. It was a particularly rough time if you were in mainland Europe.
When you think of where music was at by that point in history, tonality had been pushed to, its very limits. You think about where Wagner and Mahler and Richard Strauss had taken tonality to, and Korngold was sort of growing up, really obviously immersed in this musical language.
Things were uneasy. Things were going to happen. You could feel it. There was an energy. There was a vibrancy, for sure. And you feel that in the music. That's why the piece is almost a little bit unhinged.
Korngold decided to embrace tonality and put his own unique flavour on it.
Korngold as well takes his inspiration from late Beethoven and then goes, well, what else can I do with it? And you feel that electricity of early 30s Europe.
I have to say, from my first listen, I was just, I loved this quartet. And what is interesting and notable about Korngold is melody and melodic writing had further to go.
Ultimately, Korngold's music has this freshness. It's surprising and unique and very accessible, and brings a lot of joy. It's full of joy and life.
The genius of Korngold was that he could write music as well as Strauss.
He may not be as celebrated as some of the other composers from this particular point in history, and maybe part of that is because of the fact that he escaped Europe right before the outset of World War II and moved to the States.
Europe recognized him as such a great talent. And then he moved to America, and everybody only ever remembers him for, what he did in America.
In a way, his life took a very dramatic turn, and I know that he always felt like he had been forgotten in Europe, that his music was not necessarily appreciated or celebrated as he might have liked. But at the same time, his music and his career may have saved his life.
In this quartet that we're playing, you do hear that richness. It's a very rich kind of tapestry of sound that you hear in all of the movements. But the key to all of it is lyricism and beauty.
This quartet was a bit frightening to listen to. I played Korngold before in orchestras and been to the opera and listened to. I love Korngold. He's written a marvellous string sextet, which I'm desperate to play. This is something completely different.
The second string quartet of Korngold was written in 1933, and it was just before he went to America. And there is an overriding Viennese flavour.
first movement is perhaps the most understated, but at the same time, it's really interesting in the way that he uses the quartet, where we're used like a block. We're all playing, rhythmically together in the beginning, but these really dense, interesting harmonies.
First movement has this recurring motivic rhythmic thing, which is da-da-da-da, which makes me think immediately of Beethoven. But it's just glorious.
The second movement is this very jaunty little ditty. Which is really, it's just so much fun to play.
The second movement, for instance, is just full of life and full of twists and turns. Kind of take the music in directions that you weren't expecting. You can almost see the cinema.
The third movement's a slow movement, which is really just heart on his sleeve, romantic, gorgeous, sumptuous melodies, but framed with this most extraordinary, colourful, harmonic language.
The third movement is really one of the most beautiful slow movements. You can hear, particularly at the end, that kind of Hollywood sound emerging, although he hadn't yet gone to Hollywood. So it's very much the beginnings of that sound that we now associate with old movies. It's incredibly rich, romantic, lush sounds, but also there's a real wistfulness.
The fourth movement is akin, I would say, to Ravel's La Valse, which is this magical, almost caricature-y waltz.
The last movement is this kind of bombastic, kind of crazy movement.
It's a Viennese waltz. He even quotes from Johann Strauss's Emperor Waltz.
A lot of pieces in their last movement, you have this kind of, okay, we're getting to the finish line, and he just pulls us out for so long that it gets a level sillier and sillier and sillier. I think it is a great end to a concert because where do you go after that fourth movement? It's so nuts.
I certainly hope that all of the character and the colour and the quirks of this music are brought to light through our performance.
I'm just in awe of the compositional strength. It's only 20-25 minutes. There's 4 movements. It's extraordinarily challenging as a string player. Hands down, as a quartet, even more so.
There is a cinematic quality to his music that transports the listener, and it's fantasy music.
This is just so much more than notes on a page. It's so worthwhile. It's so much fun, and I hope we'll be living with this piece for a long time. Mostly because we've put a lot into it.
It's a blast to play. It's very difficult.
It is everything you want in a quartet. It's got all the bits, and yet it's so much more than that.